So welcome to this presentation for CRLA tutor training, goal setting strategies and time management skills. As tutors, you can help your students find this purpose and motivation. We'll talk about creating both long and short-term goals, or helping them to create those goals, and just develop even little tiny steps, one step at a time to get to the goals that they want to achieve. Sometimes taking that first step is the hardest part, but once they do, then they're on their way. And then finally, committing to those goals. How can they persist in achieving the goals that they want to achieve? And again, I just want to emphasize that it is sometimes difficult to reach students who are not motivated, so it's important to find strategies to do that. One way you can engage these students is to have them start thinking about what they hope to achieve, why they're here, and there's actually a formula you can use with them. It's value times expectation will equal their motivation. So we're talking about values between 1 and 10. So if you have a very concrete or math-minded student, this might be a good way for them to figure out, where they are, what they want to accomplish. So in terms of value, that is the value that the student personally places on having a college degree. And it varies, it really does. There are some students at ESU who really don't know why they're here. They don't really have a definition of the value of a college education. Sometimes it's cultural. Some cultures value family over education, or other things over education. So it's kind of a personal thing, and I think it's a fruitful discussion to have with the student. What do you think of a college education? How much value does it have for you? And then the expectation is what the student thinks they can achieve. Sometimes you have a student, they really value a college education, or they have that in their culture, but they do not think they're capable of achieving that. They kind of have a very low self-esteem when it comes to what they feel they can accomplish. So, when you do this formula with the student, you can see them having, they value college, that might be a 10, but then what they think they can achieve is a 0. So 10 times 0 is 0. It's not good. So you want to kind of gauge where they are with both of those items, both their value and what they expect of themselves. And again, these are good discussions to have with the student to kind of gauge where they are motivation-wise, okay? Lacking one or the other, the motivation is going to be low. At Stroudsburg University, we have many gen ed requirements. And I'm sure you're tutoring students who are fulfilling gen ed requirements in math or natural science or arts and letters or social science. And, that's not their interest. Whatever course it is, it's not in their major, and they may come to you and say, I hate this course, I don't want to be in it, but I have to fulfill this requirement. So again, your motivation isn't going to be so great with students fulfilling these requirements. But you can counter that with recent news articles have stated that employers now are looking not so much for students with business degrees or even teaching degrees. They're looking for people who are what you want to say well-rounded students who have a comprehensive education, which is exactly what ESU offers. So in the vision statement in the catalog, ESU still calls itself a comprehensive university. This is a good talking point to have with your tutees, all right? These gen eds may not interest you, but get what you can out of them because they have value. If you take a math course, you're going to learn how to problem solve, which is a skill that employers want. If you take a psychology course as a gen ed, you're going to learn how to interact with people. Communication, same idea. So that's another way to kind of get these students, you know, motivated and ready to get tutored. Now you've got the student perhaps a little bit more motivated, ready to create some goals. Okay, so you can get into a discussion about their big dream. Okay, sometimes students are hesitant to tell you what they really want to do. But when you start talking to them about it, and kind of, you know, encourage them to talk about big dreams and tell them it's not silly, it's not out of this world, what do you want to do? Okay, so you'll have a student who, I want to own my own business. I want to have my own daycare. And, you know, go with that. That's great. When students can actually start visualizing their big dream, they're more likely to be able to visualize the steps it's going to take to get to that big dream. So start with that. If they have no clue and they don't have a major yet, that's fine also. You can start breaking down goals into smaller pieces. Okay, they don't have to have that big dream. You can pick any topic, any subject, even your tutoring session, and create goals to go along with it. Okay, I really like the DAPS system of goal setting. There's another one called SMART. It doesn't matter, whatever system you like, you can, you know, use these the way you like or just take a few of them. But I think a few of them, certain ones are very important to use when you're setting goals. Okay, so the DAPS system, when you state your goal, you have to have a date. You pin yourself down. This is a very important thing because students will write goals like, oh, I'm going to do better this semester. And they think that's a great goal. Well, you know, it sounds okay, but in order to be accountable, you have to be much more specific. So instead of I'm going to do great this semester, by October 15th, I want to be running a B average in my psychology course. Or I want to have no grade under a B by midterm time, something like that. Okay, achievable, something that's realistic. If a student comes to you and they're failing a course and their goal is to have an A, that may not be feasible. So you may have to say a B or just to pass the course. Okay, personalize the goal. It's not what the parents want or, you know, to keep up with friends. It has to be a personal goal that they've thought through. A lot of times students write goals and they say what they're not going to do. I'm not going to cram, or I'm not going to miss class. Turn that into a positive. Okay, it's more, psychologically, it's more affirming when it's a positive goal. So I will attend every class. I will study for 20 minutes every night. Okay, and the last one is specific. And in my experience, I found that is the hardest one for the students to articulate when they're writing a goal, because they, in a way, they don't want to be specific. They want to have a little bit of wiggle room in that goal so they can get out of it, all right? But try to encourage your students to be as specific as possible in terms of the grade they want to get, what they want to get it by, and other conditions, like I will achieve a B+ in my psychology course by midterm time, something like that, instead of I'm going to do better in my psychology course. All right, in terms of types of goals, you have short-term and long-term. The short-term could be, you know, as brief as by the end of the semester or the end of the month. Long-term is much broader, a year, 5 years from now. That might be more in line with the dream we were talking about earlier. Okay, so these goals can be set in many different contexts, okay? It doesn't have to be for the course. You can model goal setting by using it in your tutoring sessions, all right? Engage the student, what do you want to accomplish today? and use DAPS to come up with a goal for the tutoring session. When they study, what do you want to accomplish in your studying this week? You know, try to create a goal that uses DAPS for a study plan. Or the student tells you they have a big project coming. DAPS is very handy with that. By October 1st, I will have my topic, 3 points that I want to make in the paper, and some sources by a certain date. Okay, so breaking down big tasks using DAPS is also very helpful. All right, as we said, if you were modeling goal setting in a tutoring session, create your goal. If the student presents a goal to you and it's a week, challenge them to strengthen that goal. Go back to DAPS and go through and make sure each condition is met. And also, it's very helpful to demonstrate DAPS in non-academic pursuits, like a fitness program. I mean, we've all done this, right? Oh, I'm going to be more fit this year. On New Year's, when you make your resolutions, I'm going to be more fit. When you don't specify and say specifically what you're going to do to achieve that goal, what happens? You usually don't follow through on the resolution. I mean, I know that's true in my own case. So the more specific you can get, and by demonstrating it in these different ways, not just academic, the student will understand more where you're going with this system of goal setting. And it's always important to praise the student or remind them to give themselves a little reward when they've achieved even a small step in a goal, okay? Very important to get that recognition. Okay, you have your goals. Now it's sticking with it that's tough, okay? And I would emphasize to students that it's those little tiny everyday steps that lead to achieving your goals. Simple, obvious things. Getting up in the morning, deciding you are going to go to class even though it's cloudy and cold and miserable. You are going to attend your tutoring session, okay? You are going to spend the extra time going over notes at night. These are small decisions, but what happens? They add up and they lead you towards your goal if you just make those small decisions. There's a form that it's in your packet, one of the yellow pages. It's called a 32-day commitment. Research has shown if you repeat an activity 32 times over a 32-day period, that is, it becomes a habit. I think the form is a good tool to help students establish these habits. I mean, you can feel free to hand it out, and you know, if you want to ask the student about it after the 32-day period, that's fine. Okay, so on the form they think of something observable. Okay, it can't be a thought process. It has to be something that they do that will contribute to making it a habit and therefore achieving the goal. Yeah, so if a student every night reads over their notes from the day, or reads over the textbook for 10 minutes or something like that, it's not a big deal. 20 minutes, it'll become a habit, they'll be into it, and they'll see some improvement in their grades, and it'll get them closer to reaching their goal. In terms of goals, okay, the student now has some tools to set goals, has a tool to commit to reaching the goal. Now they need some techniques to stay focused on their goals, all right? And one of the big issues with students is time management. In my job now, in other jobs I've had working with students, whether they're at risk or not, this is a big issue. I have trouble with time management. Time gets away from me. I procrastinate. And it is. I mean, it's still a challenge for me. We all have our time management issues. The thing is, time is fixed. You're not really managing time, are you? Can you change the 24-hour day? No, you really can't. So the key becomes self-management. How do I manage myself so that I can deal with the fixed amount of time I have? Okay, that's a slightly different way of looking at it. You're always going to have the same amount of time. It's how you handle it that matters. Okay, I am a proponent of Covey's, Stephen Covey, the guy who wrote The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And he is very much a proponent of the Quadrant 2 time management system, and that's what we're going to get into. And the two criteria for organizing your time is prioritizing it according to urgency and importance, okay? And students have a problem with that. First of all, they have a problem sometimes, especially newer students, deciding what's important in their lives, okay? There's a lot of distractions, a lot of electronic distractions. And when I've challenged students to tell me what's important, there's a lot of stuff going on. And they don't always single out academic activities as being important. So that's something that you might want to discuss with them too. What is important? Is getting your college education of primary importance to you? And how are we going to deal with time in terms of getting your academic activities done? So it's a big step for transitioning students. They're away from home, they're in a dorm, they have a lot of social things going on. So just getting them to focus on what's important academically is tough. And I'm sure you'll see that if you haven't already. Okay. Once you do figure out what's important, then you start talking about deadlines or urgency. Okay? Is something time sensitive, has to be done right now, or is it something that is not urgent and can be done over time? Okay, so you're going to start guiding your students to think of these two criteria, importance and urgency. Okay, here's an example, very common with students. They cram for a test the night before. They're up all night, they come in the next day, they look like heck because they haven't slept. And that would be an important activity, cramming, because, you know, you have to cram for the exam. And it's also urgent because the test is the next day. So those two elements would be important and urgent. But on the other hand, the other way of looking at this, and this is where we want to lead our students, going to SI regularly and studying in smaller chunks over time is an important activity, but it's not urgent because you do it over time in anticipation of the exam. Okay? So this is a new concept for a lot of students. I can prepare for the exam, but I can do it in smaller chunks when I can absorb it more and I don't have the tension and stress of having to cram for it the next day. Okay? So there's a big difference in those time management strategies. Now, do some students go through 4 years with the first type, cramming, getting a grade cramming? Yes, yes. Many do spend their 4 years in that particular quadrant. We'll talk about the quadrants in a minute. And you can, but it's highly stressful. You're much more subject to burnout, and you don't tend to retain the information. So we want to start gearing our students toward taking their time and studying in manageable chunks. Doing activities that are important but not urgent is more sustainable, and it's students who do that are more successful. So quadrant 1 activities are important and urgent. So we can call those types of students: procrastinators, because they're saving everything for the last minute and then, rushing to get it done. Procrastinators and putting out fires, firefighters. All right, quadrant 2 is where we want to be. Important activities, but not urgent. Okay, and those are your people who prioritize their time and invest in their time. Okay, they make smaller investments for a bigger dividend in the long run. Right? Quadrant 3 people, their activities are urgent but not so important. These are the people who intend to study. They have everything set up, and then, they get a phone call and it's 3 hours later and they still haven't studied. Or they get a knock on the dorm room door, let's go, we're going out, come with us. Yeah, but I was studying. Oh, but come out with us. So it's urgent because she has to decide then, but she doesn't get her work done. So that's why they're kind of yes people. They do things to please others while losing out on themselves. Okay? And then finally, the quadrant 4, not important, not urgent, just time wasting. Now, we all need that. It's not a horrible quadrant. None of these are really good or bad. It's how much time you spend in each. So that you want to achieve like a balance. You want most of your time, ideally, in quadrant 2. Okay, quadrant 4 is useful. We all have to relax and veg out. But if students are, if you gave this to a student and asked them to list their activities and quadrant 4 was loaded and the others not so much, then, they have an issue that they might want to address with how they're spending their time. If you want to help your students figure out what some good quadrant 2 actions are, there they are. Applying for a tutor early in the semester. Tutoring is an excellent example of a quadrant 2 activity. But a lot of students don't do that until it's an emergency. After midterm, they're failing by a lot, and they grab onto you for dear life. Okay, and then it's not going to be that effective. Everybody's stressed, including you. It would have been so much better had they thought about quadrant 2 earlier on. Okay, little bit of reading. Research has shown that students who do a little review at the end of the day do better. They retain it more. Instead of trying to cram everything into their heads the night before, doing it over time is much more effective, and they do better. It's not, again, it's a small investment for a big outcome. Okay, being in touch with the professor, engaging in class and going to the office hours, also an important quadrant 2 activity. Doing badly on a test, instead of, hiding the test and never discussing it again, taking it to the professor, asking, can you help me figure out where I went wrong, all right, before the next test, so they have a good idea of what to do next time. And like we said before, breaking down papers and projects into smaller chunks. So if your student comes to you with a giant paper that they need to do, help them do that. And then create goals for each part of that process. There are other time management strategies, and it's a matter of preference. Some students, I'll be honest with you, sometimes the quadrant 2 method doesn't work with all students. Again, they're not ready to grasp what's really important and how to break down large assignments. So you can do a regular grid where the student can just see hour by hour how they're spending their time. And I can provide one of those if you need it. And then they see where they have gaps, where they're missing, opportunities to study. I gave you a next actions list, which is really like a to-do list, but it does it by role. The student can do their role as a student, their role as a daughter or son, their role as an employee, and there are different to-do lists for each role the student has. There's also a tracking form. to have the student list a goal, and then outward observable activities, and then inward activities to do toward reaching that goal every day. All right, I've also presented a time is money, kind of an analogy that I believe was written originally by Peyton Manning, of all people, the football player. And he, maybe you could play up that angle for sports fans. He he has the students imagine that they will have automatically deposited every day in their bank account $1,440, provided that they use the money wisely in pursuit of their goals and spend every penny, otherwise they won't get the next day's deposit. And the point of that is there are 1,440 minutes in a day, and if that were money, wouldn't you be a lot more careful about how you spent it, how you allotted it? So you could give them that analogy to see how carefully they would plan spending that, and maybe contrast it to how kind of haphazardly they spend their minutes in a given day.